GUI, well, I like to just, call it GUI, but some people pronounce it as GUI. Pronounce it like GOOEY, GUI, code it as GUI. So you should know when people talk about GUI, it's about graphical user interfaces. So I only briefly discussed the histories about Java's GUI, because, well, this is Java is quite established in terms of publishing the libraries. Even, from time to time, you still see the updates here and there. But since the beginning of the Java 1.1, 1.2, the graphical user interfaces started with this package of the entire libraries to do abstract windowing toolkit. So you could write Java creating some kind of a windows. So that's a long time ago. But because that's the very first generations of a design, for the past 10, 15 years, people have been using Swing. Swing is a lightweight. Again, this is just the package, Java package. So from now on, you should know, hey, we are learning Java, not just the basic syntax. How do you create variable, initialize variable? How do you design classes, instantiate object? Not just that. You actually could use all those syntax to create larger programs. We know we could engineer the program structures by reusing the codes, using the hierarchical structure as the inheritance. But what if we need to utilize multiple functions? We could design it as an interfaces structure. But not just that. If we want to create something graphical, we need a particular libraries, right? Early on, we use a lot of Java.text, Java.utility library, or the language library. Those are kind of the default one you need to learn. But now this is a special, just another package of a lot of libraries, a lot of classes predefined, and we could use it. Swing is a lightweight independent package that you could create components of graphical user interfaces. It's still quite relevant today, but a more new GUI framework in terms of Java program design is JavaFX. So JavaFX, because it becomes almost a standardized new way to support today's graphical user interfaces, because we use multimedia a lot, we use mobile devices a lot, and a lot of them is connected with internet. So connected with the internet connectivities, you are going to utilize potentially the browser. So the development-wise, Java also improved. So that's why today what we are introducing you, how do we design the windows with the widgets, all those toolkits, how do we create the interactions from all these interfaces. We will introduce you the JavaFX. So this is just an old way of a UI. If you learned it before, how to write HTML, how to write Swing, it's still somehow relevant. But what we are going to use in this class is mainly FX, the framework. And you need to install that. So this is just to remind you, if your Eclipse is way older, particularly older than 2018 and beyond, then you probably need to update it. But if it's too new, you just installed it last winter, you probably need to downgrade it as well. So make sure that you refer to our Canvas. There's an announcement to show you the tutorial of installing. Let me reshare my desktop so you can see to install the JavaFX. So it's under the announcement, the most recent one, tutorial for JavaFX installation. So essentially, this is Eclipse, but that set the global path. How do you refer to JavaFX libraries? So just treat it as the Eclipse that you will be using, and you could still code it for your assignment 5, you could still code it for any future assignments as well. Okay. So, yes.
I may have missed it, but is there a reason that the later versions, like the latest version from this winter, doesn't have FX with it? Did they like discontinue that with Eclipse or what?
Not discontinue it. I believe the most recent one in December, they are still upgrading it, or they are having some changes. So
I did the tutorial that you posted the week ago, and I have Eclipse 2020-12, and I got it to work.
Oh, then if you got it to work, is it your JDK 11 or 8?
No, it's 11 or higher. I think I have 14 point something.
So I suspect that JDK and 8 doesn't work with the most recent Eclipse. So if you have a 2020 December Eclipse, you probably need to upgrade your JDK. Then they will be mutually supporting.
Got it. Yeah, I had to do the 11 plus installation. The 8 did not work.
Yeah. So either one, but our class standardized 8 and above. So whatever works in 11, it should work for your 8 as well. Thank you for mentioning that. But this is just a reminder. All of you have to install JavaFX. Okay. So what's new in JavaFX compared to? Can you still see my slides here? Yeah. No?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So let me make some. In JavaFX, the new thing from this new framework for GUI development, compared to Swing, is there are a couple new things that incorporated. For example, more multimedia like videos that you could show video animations through web browsers, and you could still use swings as well. If you already learned it somewhere, in your AP classes or in your high school, you could still use a swing. And it supports, most importantly, is some modern web design and support mobile devices. Because in your mobile devices, we view from the browsers, we have some touches, right? So the interaction is no longer just, the button click, the input area of your input box. Sometimes it's your tap, right? So the tap is a kind of interactions. So new JavaFX, this GUI new framework, support the more trendy modern interactions. And another thing is interactions, web interactions, typically supported by JavaScript or CSS. JavaFX actually have that support to it as well. So to learn JavaFX, we gonna have to learn new packages, and that all comes from this JavaFX package. And a couple of those libraries that we have to import it and we have to use, particularly the first one, application, next one, stage, and scene. And in next week, we will talk about event. But today, you will be seeing 3 new libraries: application, stage, and scene. This couple new libraries that will help us to create a user interface. And for the new framework, the idea to create a window is following such model. Each window, what you could see, this user interface window, we call it as a stage. And each stage, you need to create a scene to do the control of all those user interfaces elements. And each of those elements, we call it as a particular node. So you could see this structure: stage, scene, and node. They are actually connected together. Treat the stage as a window. A window, that means you could click on the button to close it, to minimize it, or to expand it, right? So there are default Windows feature they will be actually inherit, right? So the first thing here, we use this application is going to extend it into your class so that we could start building a new JavaFX application, create a stage, the stage will actually inherit from your, it's an interface, excuse me, it implements from the Windows. So a Java applications, we are going to extend from this applications parent class. And within the whole parent class, what we need to do is to override, the most important thing we need to do is to override this method called start method. This start method will come in with one argument, one parameter, that's your stage, that's your primary stage. So this primary stage, meaning this goes hand in hand, there's association with your stage and your scene. So you create a stage, that means you create a Windows. Create a Windows, you just have kind of the look of this window. What are you going to do with this window? You need to create a scene in order to gain control of whatever the widget, whatever the components within this scene. So that means, well, within the same desktop, within the same application, I could create multiple stages. That means I could create multiple windows, right? So one application potentially could have a multiple windows, right? So that way, each window, they have their subdivisions control, right? So that you won't mess up with other windows. Mainly all those widgets will follow whatever the control within the same window. So this is what we are going to see today. So to construct the user interface, here is going to create one window. We are going to create a stage, which is the window. Within the window, the stage, we are going to prepare a scene. The scene is going to control whatever the components into it. So to construct a scene, we need to create all those components, and all those components, they will follow in the mathematical model. Here is the node link, it's a graph. So you can see a node link graph. This is what the foundation of a computer science, everything we could put it into the graph so that we could compute what's the shortest path, how do we traverse the entire network, entire tree, or entire node link presentation. So in UI, this scene graph will treat it, the first element, you will treat it a primary stage. Within that, the very first element, we are called it as the root. Whatever new element added in, we will add it to the branch node, leaf node, the left node, right node. At this point, you don't need to concern how do we make sure each element will be presented first. I'll tell you next. But remember, to construct the UI, we need a couple elements to set it up. Set up the stage, which is the window. Next thing is to construct the scene. And then we have to create some components within the scene. So 3 main components. Now let's switch to the new slides for today. If you go to today's week 4, the new slides, JavaFX 2. We are going to start creating couple UIs. So the agenda is, well, we have to practice the model, this framework, JavaFX framework called a stage scene node model. And we are going to create basic one project with a simple UI. So to do so, first of all, you need to create a JavaFX project. And then you have, within this project, the codes will look like this. Public class, your class's name, which is your JavaFX project, will inherit from your application class. So that means you need to import the application class. Now, once you created, the default, we say any Java application comes with the mem method, right? Static void mem method, that's your driver class. So that you could actually activate this Java application. So same thing for JavaFX project. This is your driver class as well. So that comes with the main method, right? So now I'm going to switch to my Eclipse. Let me Can you see my Eclipse now?
Yep.
Okay. So within your Eclipse, create a new project, new, and go to others. And choose JavaFX project and just click on next and call it, well, my first Java GUI. And just click on finish. And well, it comes with, and if you open it up, the source within this application package, there's a main class. Well, that's called it, rename it. Main is rename it refactor. Well, this is my first GUI. Okay. All right, so open up this my first GUI. Okay, so I don't want.
Professor,
Yes.
We don't see any GUI. when you open
internet's been having an issue for some people. Could you please go back and perhaps repeat some of the steps?
What's your question again? Sorry, I did not get it.
Everyone's been having a bunch of internet issues, so
Oh.
they want you to go back and explain a lot again.
Okay. All right. So let me restart. Restart to create this Java FX project. You see, this is my cleaned. So let me maybe delete it. So in your Eclipse, especially FX Eclipse, right? New, a Java project. So let's just create an FX project. Okay, go to others and choose Java FX project. And just call it my first GUI. This is default package name. And hit finish. So you create this my first GUI application. Okay, so once you open it, there should be a default comes with the main method, a main class. So whatever the class name, it extends from JavaFX application. Okay, so this is default. I want you to, let's remove it. We don't need it. We are not talking about that yet. So what you should see should be two methods. One is we already know public stated void main method, right? So we know this method comes from any Java application. You should have the driver class that will drive your application. That's your main method, right? So we already know this. But in JavaFX, the main method is going to call this static method called launch methods. helps your JavaFX project will be launched. So you are going to if you create a JavaFX project, it comes with that. But I wanted to point it out because we inherit from applications class. So one thing that we need to override your parents' method to have your implementation. Why do we need to override it? Possibly because your parent class, it's an abstract class. There's no actual implementation, right? So in our child class here, this is called main class. We have to implement this start method. And the start method comes with the primary stage argument. Okay, so this argument is the first parameters that will set up your stage, right? So if you refer to your slides, so let me go to slides simultaneously.
Hey, Professor.
Mm-hmm. Can you see my e-clip? You have a question?
Yes. Can you excuse us for attendance today because of the Wi-Fi issues? Some of us are like getting kicked out, and we're unable to join class.
So I would suggest you to watch the lecture recording. So we recorded this, so you are not missing anything. You just have to catch up, okay?
Yeah, but can you excuse attendance for the actual class if we're not able to join?
Then you just watch the lecture after the class. I'm not taking attendance today. I'm taking attendance Friday. There is going to be a quiz. Okay, so now you can see the slides. I put it side by side. To create a JavaFX project, we need to have a couple things. First one is to inherit from your application. And second one is to still have your main methods. But what's going to happen in your methods is you have to call the static methods launch so that it will support your JavaFX applications to become a standalone application. So because we inherit from application class, we have to override one of the methods to set it up your my first JavaFX GUI. Okay, so we need to override the method called start methods. So start method is important. Without this start, nothing will be starting. Okay, same thing if you don't launch from the main method, then your FX project will not be able to launch as a standalone. You cannot run it from your IDE. Okay, so now, so this is pretty much the setup, same thing like my left-hand side ID in your Eclipse, right? Now look at the next slide. We mentioned that create a window. Create a window is to setting up the stage. And once you have the stage, it's not over yet. You just declare this GUI. You still need to create a scene, connect this window with the scene. Use the scene to gain control with all the elements. Okay, so what we are going to do is to implement it within this start methods. Why do we implement it here? Because you call the start methods in your JavaFX application. This is where your starting points, and that's giving you the initial stage, right? So once you have the stage, what do? Let's put in a couple elements into that particular scene, okay? And so, for example, we could put in a button that's called a BTN button, right? A new button. And within this button methods, button constructor, it will be the display text of the button. So let's say first button, right? Now you see this is the errors showing that, hey, I don't recognize what's the button. So you could click on this that will tell you, hey, I don't recognize it, you have to import it. So that's imported from JavaFX scene control, create one button elements. Okay, so the button is variable is called btn1 button. Now, well, within this start methods, we have the primary stage as the scene. So we could use create the scene. That's called a scene one, and new scene, and put in the very first elements as our root node. So here I already created a button one, so let's just put it in. So you could refer to the JavaFX API. You will know the scene constructor default comes with the 3 arguments. One is the root node. When you create a stage and the scene, what's inside the scene? You need to refer to one element. So I'm referring to the only element that I created, that's the button. And the next 2 variables, the parameters there is the sizes of your window. So for example, in the slides, I put in 200, 200. So that's width and height of the window sizes. So in this way, essentially what I'm saying is starting this application, use this primary stage. I'm not doing anything yet. I'm creating a scene within this primary stage. But now scene is created with the first element. What are you going to see in this windows is just one button. And the window size is 200 by 200. Now, finally, I created what I needed, the scene and the elements. I will use the primary stage, the set scene, okay? And referring to my scene. So remember the connections from starting point for your FX application is the starting methods using the primary stage is the default stage that's created for your window, right? Connect this window, set scene to whatever the scene that you are creating for this window. Okay, now let's set it. Then finally, we could show it. So these are the couple key things that you need in order to create a UI. Once you have these 3 lines, well, 4 lines with creating one element, you could already run this application. Just run it as Java application. That you see, I created a window 200 by 200, and it's a button. The entire scene is assigned currently as a button, right? So, well, now we know, okay, creating starting points, creating a scene is how you create a window. Then I could create multiple stages as well, right? So if I create multiple stages, meaning I'm creating multiple windows. So why don't we just do, I put the slides on the right-hand side so you could refer to. You could create multiple scenes. So let's create multiple scenes as our second window, right? So new. And I could new button as a second BTN and set it as, let's change the window size so that you know I'm creating a new window. What did, oh, okay, so here should be the should be the first variable. So once you create this is just a new scene. That means I am going to need a new stage, the secondary stage, to help me control this new scene. Okay, so once you have a new stage, you could use secondary stage and set the scene as yours second scene, right? And secondary stage, just show it, right? So this way I'm creating a one application from start method with the two windows. How do I know? Because I have a secondary stage, first primary stage as my window. So you could run it again. So now you notice that once I run it, the two windows are overlapping. So, but essentially you see two windows, two scenes, each scene assigned to just one element. Okay, so this is just the practice to knowing that, well, each stage you need to create corresponding scene to gain control of any elements. So obviously we could create multiple elements, right? So in this case, that we continue building our UI, right? So let me mark down a block of comments. I will share what I work with these applications onto Canvas after class. Okay, so if you look at the next slides, we talk about JavaFX. It's about creating the stage scenes and nodes, that model. So now looking at this model, stage and scene is basically one-on-one association. And one scene could have parent nodes. In this case, what's our parent node over here? It's just our button one, right? So what if we have a multiple nodes? We have a multiple elements, right? So in each scene that we could have only one parent, but one parent could have multiple controlled elements, the child, right? So you can have several children as the elements within the entire scene. So how do we do so? We need some sort of a layout that could control it. Otherwise, here we will only see one as the parent node, right? So that's why when we run this application, the entire window size is a giant buttons, right? We treated this window 200, 200, just the button sizes, right? So what if we want to put multiple buttons into it? Imagine you could create a calculator, right? So there are multiple buttons on the calculator and the display area, multiple components, right? So how do we do so, right? So that means therefore creating a UI, create a stage, we create a corresponding scene, but now we need some sort of a layout to help us control it. So we could refer to the layout as our parent node. Within this layout, we could put whatever the buttons that we wanted, then they will be perfect. We could arrange all the UI elements that we want into it. So we are going to gradually introduce you all those elements. So look at the next slide, is where we started to think about how do we assign that layout to our parent node, right? Again, FX is about stage, scene, and nodes control flow. So this model, that means we need to design this layout as our parent node. So organize your layouts. We need a couple layout components. They are from the libraries as well. It's already designed. We need to learn how to use it. So there are a couple common ones. For example, flow pane, stack pane, grid pane, tab pane, scroll. So by even reading the class name, you could probably think that, well, flow, meaning the layout manager pretty much arranging every element follow the flow, right? Stack means stacking one element on top of each other, then you could drag and drop. And you could design the layout as grid. You could also put it as tab pages, like our browsers here, right, as a tab. Or you could, is it scrollable on the UI? And or is it by the horizontal boxes, right? So now here is one example. By reading at this methods, we know we implement everything within the start method. So we utilize the default primary stage scene. I created 3 buttons. So now create 3 buttons. How do you assign it to your scene, right? So early on, we know we actually just put in that button 1 into your scene. But now we have 3. How do you do so? That means we are going to create this layout component. Here, I will use floor pan and get the children to add every single element into the pan. So the method get children is allowing you to add whatever components into this layout space. Okay, so the method is defined within the library called floor pan class. And same thing for the rest of the lines of codes. You could see that now the scene you refer to the parent nodes is floor pan, which is the element, right? Not only the button 1 anymore, right? So this will make your UI become flexible. I could create multiple elements. So let's try this out. So I will suggest you, to maybe just copy some of the codes so that we don't create from scratch. Okay, so one thing by copying from slides is that the quotes, they are not easy to recognize. So you may have to change the quotes in your Eclipse. So we already have seen, we just needed to have here as a floor pan, right? And the quotes, it's because the fonts, it should be button 3. Okay, so here floor pan is the new layout that we are learning, is the component. So you wanted to import this floor pan class from JavaFX scene layout. So once you create a layout, you edit in. How do you edit in? You use this floor pan object to call get children, because we treat this stage scene and nodes. Node is actually a graph, right? So the first one, we treat this floor pan as the parent node. Then parent nodes, you are going to create, all the children's. So in this case, we add get children's and just added the first element into it, UI elements into it. Okay. Now, once you insert those codes, you could run it as Java application. So you should see here, the UI is again 200 by 200, but we have 3 buttons now, right? So isn't it cool, right? It's no longer just 200 by 200. So imagine that you could create your application now. Look at your, browser is actually an application. You could create a drop-down menu. You could create a click box. You could do all sorts of other things once we start learning more how to gain control of your UI. Right, so this is just creating a layout. Now, come back to the, you could terminate that application, come back to the slides. Look at the slides here, not just the floor plan. You could try the stack pan, grid pan, but where do you know, right? So which class, how do I use it, right? So the best way is to JavaFX API, save it as you were in your bookmark. So you are going to use JavaFX scene and the layout a lot. And within the layout, here are like border pan, tells you, it looks like there is a top control button border, and you could also use flow pan, which is free flow. We just keep adding in, and which is probably the easiest one, most relaxed layout. And you could also use a grid pan. And there are so many others. I would encourage you, stack pans, stack every element on top, which is not looking good, but sometimes you could overlapping images together. They might look cool. So this will be where you should refer to how to use. So make sure you go to FX API, bookmark the API. You might need it from time to time. Okay, so now once we learn the layout, that's not quite the end yet, right? So after designing the layout, we could actually populating how we want the UI to be. Because the UI is not just the buttons, right? It's how you display the text. Sometimes it's the entire area. You print out things, and you could have images, you could have multimedias, you could have a checkbox, combo box, radio box. You could have so many other components, right? So this belongs to the Java scene layout, and excuse me, control and layout as well. Within the control, this is where, why do we call it control? That means graphical user interfaces is for users to interact. So interact, that means the user could gain control to it. Right, so this is why the library here is called control. So the control, you're gonna see buttons, checkbox, or maybe even date picker. You could select the date, month, right? You could also hyperlink it, labels, a list. There are so many scroll bars, scroll pans. There are so many different control elements. So come back to the slides. We could try first thing to practice with. We create the UI with the 3 buttons, but we could actually have more control, multiple elements into our UIs, right? So once you have the layout managers, the layouts, how you want it to look, is gain control, write codes to actually handle it. When we click the button, what do you want to do, right? When you select a drop-down menu, when you click on the radio buttons, when you type in the text field, what do you want to do next, right? So this is where we connect from designing the graphical UI. Next thing is mostly to code. How do we handle all those interactions that you could be doing to the buttons? So just give me a taste of it, which we are going to repeat it, practice this, is to do a little control on the button. For example, this is where in GUI, Java application design, we call it event handling. And so once you create a button, when you click it, what do you want to do? Do you want to print things? You could print it to the console, you could print it to the UI, right? So not just handling the events. The more sophisticated thing is, what if things go wrong, right? User could actually input things that we couldn't imagine. We need to handle the potential exceptions, right? So handle the events, we also need to handle the exception. That's why creating UI is fun. It's very creative, but we could make a lot of mistakes from there. That's why we need to write codes to handle the potential troubles, problems that could come up with. So the most thing that that we needed to try on is do this event handling. This is the whole new concept. Events meaning, well, users could see the UI interacting with that from the foreground. Those kind of interactions, such as your mouse movement, button clicking, but there are certain interactions that's implicit, that's actually doing it at the background of the program. For example, the timers, right? How long have you been logging on this website? How long have you been turning on this application, right? So the operations, the timers, that's some events that could potentially operating at the background. So events could be foreground, could be background, and how do we actually handle it, do the control. So the control meaning we actually need to properly write codes like any Java application that you are getting control using the conditional statement, switch, right? Or the iterations statements to help you looping to the block of the functions that you needed to do. So common events could be something like your mouse movement, you type in on your keyboards, or you drag and drop of the boxes, or you simply touch the screens. So we could try the very simple one, which is the button click. That's the most common use control and most interactive, sort of intuitive one. When you see a UI, see a button, meaning the button is not disabled, that user could click it whenever you want it. If you don't want user to click it, you default actually disable it, so user cannot click on any of those buttons, right? So now, if you look at the last slide, within the start, we have one button, and we know this button is called button 1. Now, within this button 1, we are going to call the functionality, the methods called setOnAction. The meaning of setOnActions is trying to do to the button. When this button have some actions, setOnActions, whatever you do with this button, you click it, you drag it, or whatever happens to it, I'm going to handle it. So that's why here we actually knew the entire new button handler object. So which we will refer it to in a class. Well, in this case, I'm writing it as a separate class, but we could also implement it as the inner class. So why do we organize it as the inner class? Remember, Monday we just talked about inner classes. One of the purpose of inner class is in order to simplify your design, program design. All those inner classes, they will only appear when this particular button happens, have actions. All those associated with this button's events will become activated now, right? So we want it to be, there's a sequential actions going on. So that's why we want to kind of hide all those trivia functionality into the inner one, because simplify the program designs as it is. So by looking at this example, we will call this button handler, but without understanding it much, I know this button handler actually implements. Implements meaning here is the inheritance structure is coming out, right? So there is an abstract interface type called event handling, comes with a type of actions. So today as well, time is up. A lot of you have internet troubles, so I hope you get a chance to come back to revisit, to participate this lecture recording after class. But make sure minimally you know how to create on Eclipse a new project. I'm going to share this, my first GUI applications onto the onto our canvas, and we will come back to discuss event handling next time. Any questions so far?